The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah's trembling hands gripped the edge of Marcus Bennett's mahogany desk. Her vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back all morning, and her voice cracked as the words tumbled out in desperate succession. "Please don't fire me, sir, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. She watched his expression shift, his jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and her heart plummeted. This was it. This was the moment her entire world would collapse. Sarah Mitchell had always been a fighter. At 28, she'd clawed her way from community college to a respectable position as a junior accountant at Bennett & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious financial firms. Every morning, she arrived at the gleaming downtown office building an hour early, meticulously reviewing spreadsheets and double-checking calculations that her colleagues rushed through. She wasn't the most naturally gifted with numbers, but what she lacked in raw talent, she compensated for with sheer determination and an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. The pregnancy had been unexpected, a surprise that came during the most inconvenient time imaginable. Her boyfriend, Derek, had disappeared the moment she'd shown him the positive test, leaving behind nothing but a hastily scribbled note about not being ready for this kind of responsibility. The words had stung worse than any physical blow. Now, 3 months along and facing mounting medical bills she couldn't begin to afford, Sarah was barely keeping her head above water. The mistakes had started small. A transposed number here, a miscalculated total there. The morning sickness made concentration nearly impossible, and the exhaustion pulled at her like an anchor. She'd tried to push through, downing ginger ale and crackers at her desk, excusing herself to the bathroom multiple times each morning. But last week's error had been catastrophic, a decimal point in the wrong place on the Henderson account that could have cost the firm nearly $50,000 if Marcus hadn't caught it during his final review. Marcus Bennett was a legend in Chicago's financial district. At 45, he'd built his firm from nothing, earning a reputation for brilliance, precision, and absolutely zero tolerance for incompetence. People whispered about him in break rooms and networking events, some with admiration, others with barely concealed fear. He was known for his perfectly tailored suits, his steel gray eyes that seemed to calculate your net worth in seconds, and his ability to terminate underperforming employees without a trace of emotion. "It's just business," he'd say, and that would be that. Standing in his corner office now, with Lake Michigan stretching endlessly behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, Sarah felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She'd rehearsed what she would say 100 times during the sleepless night before, but now that the moment had arrived, all her carefully prepared words had evaporated. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The expression that crossed his face wasn't what Sarah had expected. It wasn't anger or disgust or even the cold indifference she'd feared. It was something else entirely, something that looked almost like pain. "How far along are you?" His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. 13 weeks, Sarah whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "I know I've been making mistakes. I know I haven't been performing at the level you expect, and I have no excuse for that. But sir, I need this job. I have no family, no savings, no one to help me. If you fire me now, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know how. I'll survive." The tears she'd been fighting finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks despite her desperate attempts to maintain some shred of dignity. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry, wouldn't beg, but desperation had stripped away all her pride. Marcus stood abruptly, and Sarah flinched, preparing for the inevitable dismissal. Instead, he walked to the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. 23 years ago, he finally said, his voice so low she had to strain to hear it, "My wife stood in an office much like this one. She was pregnant with our daughter, and her boss, a man I'd considered a friend, told her that motherhood and career advancement were incompatible. He fired her on the spot." Marcus turned back to face Sarah, and she was stunned to see moisture gathering in his eyes. "We lost everything. Our apartment, our savings, nearly our marriage. The stress sent her into early labor. Our daughter, Emma, was born at 28 weeks. She spent 3 months in the NICU. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the Marcus Bennett from the legends. This was a man with scars, with history, with a wound that had never quite healed. Emma survived, Marcus continued, but those months were hell. Every day wondering if our daughter would live to see tomorrow, every medical bill stacking higher than the last, watching my wife blame herself for something that was never her fault. He moved back to his desk, but instead of sitting, he pulled open a drawer and retrieved a framed photograph. He turned it toward Sarah, a beautiful young woman in a graduation cap and gown, her smile radiant. She graduated from Northwestern last year. Pre-med. She wants to be a neonatal specialist. Sarah didn't know what to say. The office suddenly felt too small, too intimate. I started this firm because I vowed that no one who worked for me would ever face what my wife faced, Marcus said firmly. Sarah, I'm not firing you. But we are making some changes. He pulled out a notepad and began writing. First, you're being reassigned to the Henderson account full-time. They've specifically requested you after you caught 3 errors in their previous quarter's statements that our senior team missed. Second, you're getting a 20% raise, effective immediately. Third, I'm putting you on our premium health insurance plan, which includes comprehensive maternal and neonatal care. Sarah's legs suddenly felt weak. She gripped the desk harder. Sir, I don't understand. Fourth, Marcus interrupted, his pen still moving across the paper. You'll be working from home 2 days a week, starting next month. After the baby comes, you'll have 6 months of fully paid maternity leave, and when you return, we'll arrange on-site childcare. He looked up, and for the first time since she'd entered his office, he smiled. Does that work for you? The sob that escaped Sarah's throat was equal parts relief and disbelief. Why? She managed to gasp. Why would you do all this? Marcus set down his pen and met her eyes directly. Because someone should have done it for my wife. Because every parent deserves the chance to provide for their child without sacrificing their dignity. Because the measure of a successful business isn't just profit margins and quarterly reports, it's whether we lift people up or tear them down. He extended his hand across the desk. You're a good accountant, Sarah. You're thorough, honest, and you care about getting things right. Those qualities matter more than a few mistakes made while you're literally growing a human being. Sarah took his hand, shaking it as tears continued streaming down her face, but now they were tears of gratitude, of overwhelming relief, of hope she'd thought was lost forever. 6 months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Emma Grace, Grace for the second chance she'd been given, and Emma in honor of the woman whose story had changed her life. And when Marcus Bennett held that baby in the hospital, his own Emma standing beside him with tears in her eyes, Sarah finally understood that sometimes the universe gives us the power to heal old wounds by preventing new ones. Sometimes kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing we can offer. And sometimes, the people we least expect become the family we need most.